A bear visited his cabin every night. Years later, he discovered why. The mountain cabin stood alone, surrounded by endless pine trees and the heavy silence of the wilderness. Snow covered the ground in a thick white blanket, muffling every sound. Inside, Daniel sat by the fire, the crackling wood his only companion. He had moved here after his father's passing, searching for peace, though the solitude often weighed on him like the cold outside. That night, as the wind howled through the trees, Daniel heard something unusual, the crunch of heavy footsteps outside his cabin. He froze. Out here, visitors were rare, and unexpected ones were rarely good. Slowly, he set down his mug and reached for the rifle propped by the door. Peering through the frosted window, his breath caught in his chest. A massive shape moved in the moonlight. The creature lumbered closer until its form became clear, a bear. Daniel's heart raced. The animal was enormous, its fur dusted with snow, its eyes glinting like embers in the pale light. He expected it to claw at the door, to smash the windows, to do what wild predators did when hunger drove them close to humans. But instead, the bear stopped just a few feet away. It stood there, silent, watching. Daniel gripped the rifle tighter, waiting for the moment of attack. Minutes passed. The bear neither moved forward nor turned away. It simply lowered itself onto its haunches and sat in the snow, facing the cabin as though keeping watch. The fire popped behind him, but Daniel couldn't look away. His pulse thundered in his ears. Finally, after what felt like hours, the bear rose, shook the snow from its coat, and lumbered back into the dark forest. Daniel let out the breath he didn't realize he was holding. He didn't sleep that night. He couldn't shake the image of the giant creature sitting calmly in the snow, as though it had come not to harm him, but for some reason he could not yet understand. The following evening, Daniel found himself restless. Every creak of the cabin made him glance at the door, half expecting the heavy footsteps to return. He told himself it had been a one-time encounter. The bear had wandered too close and would not come back. Yet, deep inside, he wasn't so sure. When night fell and the forest sank into silence, Daniel sat by the window, staring into the moonlit snow. His stomach tightened as the shadows shifted between the trees. Then he heard it, the crunch of snow under great weight, steady and deliberate. His breath caught. The bear was back. It stepped into the clearing once more, its fur glistening with frost. Daniel's hand hovered near the rifle, but something in him hesitated. The beast made no threatening move. Like the night before, it stopped just short of the cabin, lowered itself to the ground, and sat facing the warm glow inside. Daniel watched in disbelief. The animal didn't growl, didn't pace, didn't leave. It simply sat there, almost as though keeping company with him from the other side of the wall. Hours passed. Daniel tried to distract himself with books, with stoking the fire, but his gaze kept drifting back to the figure outside. The bear remained still, its breath rising in plumes of white against the dark sky. Finally, when dawn began to creep across the horizon, the creature stood and slowly retreated into the forest. Daniel pressed his hand against the cold window pane, heart pounding with confusion. Why would a wild bear return, night after night, only to sit quietly and leave at sunrise? Fear still clung to him, but another feeling began to creep in, curiosity. What did this bear want? And why, of all places, had it chosen his lonely cabin in the mountains? Days turned into weeks, and the bear's visits continued. Each night, without fail, Daniel would hear the familiar crunch of snow outside his cabin. The enormous creature would arrive after sunset, sit in the same spot by the clearing, and remain there until the first hint of dawn. At first, Daniel's nerves kept him on edge. He slept little, listening for the sound of claws against wood or a sudden crash through the door. But the attack never came. The bear's presence was strangely calm, predictable. One evening, as the storm raged outside, Daniel felt an unexpected urge. He took a loaf of bread from the counter, stepped cautiously to the door, and cracked it open. The icy wind whipped at his face, but his eyes locked on the dark shape in the snow. The bear lifted its head, meeting Daniel's gaze with glowing eyes. For a long moment, man and beast stared at each other. Then, Daniel placed the bread on the snow just outside the threshold and quickly retreated. He watched through the window as the bear lumbered forward. Slowly, with deliberate care, it took the offering in its jaws. Not a growl, not a sign of aggression, just quiet acceptance. Then it returned to its place and sat again, as though nothing had changed. Over time, Daniel grew braver. He left scraps of meat, apples, whatever he had to spare. And always, the bear accepted without harm. A strange rhythm formed between them. He worked in the day, and at night, he knew he would not be alone. There were nights Daniel found himself speaking aloud, telling the silent visitor about his struggles, about his late father, about the crushing loneliness of the mountains. The bear never moved, never answered, but Daniel felt heard. A bond had formed in the silence of the wilderness, not of fear but of trust. Years slipped quietly through the seasons. Winters came and went, and the bear never broke its nightly ritual. By now, Daniel no longer flinched at the sound of its arrival. Instead, he often found himself waiting, food ready by the door, as though preparing for an old friend. The locals, however, did not see it that way. On his rare trips to the nearby town, Daniel would mention the bear, careful not to share too many details. The reaction was always the same: disbelief, then warnings. "You're playing with fire," one shopkeeper muttered. "Bears don't come to visit," another said. "They come to kill. You're lucky it hasn't yet." Daniel tried to shrug off their words, but at night, as he watched the silent figure outside, unease grew in his chest. Why had it chosen him? What invisible tether tied this wild creature to his cabin? There were moments when the mystery deepened further. Some nights, the bear would pace restlessly, circling the clearing with low grunts, as though warding off unseen dangers. Other times, it would sit so still that Daniel wondered if it was guarding him, not simply visiting. The truth gnawed at him. He could not accept that an animal acted with such consistency for no reason. Yet, no matter how much he searched his memory, no answer came. His father had built the cabin long before Daniel was born, and Daniel himself had never encountered this beast before that first snowy night. Still, every time doubt crept in, the bear's steady presence calmed him. Whatever the reason, he had never felt truly alone since it arrived. But deep inside, he knew there was a story hidden beneath those amber eyes, one he had yet to uncover. The night was wild with thunder, lightning flashing against the peaks and echoing through the forest. Daniel sat by the fire, listening to the storm batter his cabin. But outside, through the sheets of rain, he could see it. The bear was still there, sitting in the downpour as though nothing could drive it away. That night, a knock startled him. It was rare, almost unheard of, for anyone to come this deep into the mountains. When Daniel opened the door, an old park ranger stood before him, soaked from the storm. His weathered face and tired eyes carried the weight of decades in the wilderness. "I hope you don't mind some shelter," the ranger said, stepping inside. "Storm caught me farther out than I expected." Daniel welcomed him, offering a seat by the fire. The ranger's gaze wandered to the window, where the hulking shadow of the bear sat unmoving in the rain. His expression tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. "So," the ranger murmured, "it still comes." Daniel's chest tightened. You know this bear?" The ranger nodded slowly. Not the bear itself, perhaps, but the story. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Many years ago, before you were born, your father found a mother bear trapped near this very cabin. Hunters had wounded her, and her cubs were crying helplessly. He tended her wounds, kept her safe, even shared food until she healed. She never forgot that kindness." Daniel's throat went dry. "And this one outside?" "One of her cubs," the ranger said firmly. "Grown now. But the blood remembers. Loyalty like that runs deeper than we understand." Daniel turned to the window again. The bear's silhouette looked different now, not a random visitor, but a living link to his father's hidden past. The mystery was no longer about why the bear came. It was about why it had never left. The storm passed, leaving the mountains washed clean under a pale dawn. Daniel stepped outside, the cold air sharp in his lungs. The bear was still there, sitting calmly in the clearing, its fur damp from the night's rain. For the first time, Daniel didn't see it as a stranger. He saw it as a guardian. A silent protector tied not to him, but to the memory of his father's kindness. Slowly, Daniel walked forward, his boots crunching in the wet snow. The bear lifted its head, watching him closely. Fear no longer gripped him, only understanding. "You've been here all these years," Daniel whispered, his voice unsteady. "Not because of me, but because of him." The bear's amber eyes held his gaze. In them, Daniel imagined echoes of the past, his father kneeling in the woods, tending to a wounded mother, feeding hungry cubs. Acts of compassion that had carved a bond across time. The bear rose to its full height, towering over him, yet Daniel felt no danger. Instead, the animal lowered itself once more, giving a low rumble that sounded almost like acknowledgement. In that moment, Daniel realized the truth. The bear had not come for food, nor for shelter. It had come for loyalty. For gratitude. For memory. Years later, people would still whisper of the strange man and his nightly visitor. But Daniel knew better. He understood that the bond between man and beast was not born of fear or need, but of respect. And as long as the cabin stood, he knew the bear would return. And so, in the silence of the mountains, a bond of loyalty endured, born from kindness, carried by time, and guarded by a bear. True kindness never fades. A single act of compassion can outlive generations, binding hearts, even across species. What we give to the world always finds its way back.